r/Askreddit, how did that teacher get fired at your school? Not just that teacher, but the principal. He'd gotten wind that he might be fired because of less than ideal job performance, so he decided to drum up sympathy by belly stabbing himself in the men's room and blaming a student. Said student was arrested, but the police were immediately suspicious of his story when they noticed his shirt was unharmed. In other words, whoever stabbed him courteously lifted up his shirt beforehand so as not to tear a hole in it. He wound up being forced to resign, in addition to getting probation and a heavy fine. Male substitute teacher that taught regularly at my Catholic high school who wasn't fired but banned from teaching in our female PE class after we reported him for repeatedly instructing us to stretching positions that were sexual/inappropriate. For example, he asked us to bend over with both hands against the wall and shake our hips back and forth. Bonus, he subbed for my geography class the following year, and during one of his classes I asked to go to the bathroom to take care of my feminine issue. He asked me what kind of feminine issue specifically. I was too embarrassed to say it was my period, so I said, well, you know. To which he replied, yes, but I want to hear you say it out loud. Creepy. An hour before the state championship football game, the head football coach/pet teacher got a student who wasn't on the team to come up to him and pretend to shoot him. He used fake blood and everything. No one knew it was going to happen, and his own son was on the team. We lost the game too. I was in elementary school in the late 90s when our school finally got hooked up with internet. I don't know if it was readily available information back then that your history could be accessed, but we had a teacher watching child porn who got caught because he didn't clear his history. Our principal in high school, her husband cheated on her with another teacher that worked there, and they went through a nasty divorce. Next thing you know, she's making her way through our football team. I think she slept with 3 of them and ended up dating one for quite a while. Oddly, I don't recall if she was ever fired or left on her own. Music teacher, also in high school, cheated on his wife with a middle school music teacher. Then cheated on her with a student that had graduated, cheated on her with a student, and got her pregnant and married her. Last I heard he still worked there and was with another recently graduated student. I'm sure there are more, but the last one I can remember was our office secretary in middle school who also taught art class a couple times a week. She was actually a really great lady, but unfortunately for her our school got picked to be on an episode of Sally Jess Raphael or Ricky Lake, something like that. They had some random people come in throughout the week and ask to pick up a student, and this lady just signed them out. It aired, they interviewed her, and she got fired. High school gym teacher, apparently he showed up to a hotel room expecting to bang a 13 years old, but got busted by the cops instead. The bus driver I had in 5th grade was a total nightmare. He'd get us to school on time, but we'd often get home very late because he'd stop the bus to have screaming meltdowns. This was a bus of K5 kids, and while sometimes we could get chatty or rambunctious, no one was doing dangerous or delinquent stuff. Most days, we'd just get on the bus, sit down and chat with friends, and wait to be dropped off. But that was too much for this lunatic, and if he felt that kids were talking too much or somehow being disrespectful, he'd pull the bus over and scream at us. At length, he'd scare the really little kids, and if you tried to apologize or to stand up to him, he'd just get louder and angrier. He never touched any of us, but he'd get so mad, we'd worry he was going to shake or spank us. He'd insist that everyone be perfectly still and silent, real easy for a terrified kindergarten kid, right? And every little thing he perceived as going against that order would start the screaming again and restart the clock on the wait for him to start driving again. We got home late often. A few times I remember getting home around the same time as my dad, who had a pretty long commute to and from his 9 to 5 job. I have no earthly idea why none of the parents ever said anything about this, but us kids were too terrified to tell on him. Toward the end of the year, I think a few of us did. I turned him in. To save my own hide, my mom started yelling at me for getting home late, like I had any autonomy as a 12-year-old who rode the damn bus home from the next town over, and I just told her he liked to stop and scream at us, and he wasn't brought back the following year. As an adult, I have a lot of questions for the adults in this situation, and I sincerely doubt that any of their answers will impress me. The dude clearly hated his life, but that's no excuse to take it out on a bunch of helpless, trapped kids. Good-looking math teacher had a reputation of hooking up with senior girls, like days after graduation. He did this almost every year. People even started to make bets on who Mr. S was going to hook up with this year. There was nothing technically illegal about it, because they were all 18 and graduated, but it got to the point where parents were calling in and saying they didn't want their daughters in his class. They were finally able to fire him when he showed up to work drunk. My high school had a sub that they used frequently who was eventually fired for repeated instances of pressuring girls to join him in storage closets to listen to his poetry. Luckily I wasn't one of those girls, but once when he was subbing for my chemistry class he kept interrupting my work to ask me to play tic-tac-toe with him and touching my shoulder. The drama teacher at my high school was arrested for some sort of weird sex sting in the 90s. I can't remember if it involved any students, but it did involve minors and I think CP. He always gave me creepy Ike vibes when I was at that school, so I wasn't surprised when I saw him on the local news. When I was in grade 11 we had a teacher exchange with a New Zealand school. Our gym teacher went there, we got one back. The one we got back had an affinity for young girls it seems. Our high school was in a small town and most of the kids were from farming families, and everyone plays hockey including the girls, and I guess our NZ gym teacher didn't know that. After a cross-country running practice he offered to rub down one of the girls in my class and got handsy with her. She kicked the ever-loving shit out of him. Broken nose, 2 black eyes, split lip, you name it. He was gone immediately, but given that it was a small town we all saw him out of school before he got shipped out. The day before he left, he got his ass handed to him again by a couple of relatives of the girl. Honestly, I don't know how he lived to make it to the plane. About a week later our original gym teacher was back and very pissed about having his exchange cut short. I had a teacher who was out Iraq and Afghanistan when it was really hot. We are talking Desert Storm in the 2003 invasion. This guy was a special forces combat medic. He was also cool as fuck. Everyone but a few people loved him. One of the turds in school, who was 130 pounds sopping wet, said he could beat the shit out of the teacher to his face. The teacher told him something like, "Yeah, right, go for it." The kid gets up and swings at this teacher, who immediately goes back into combat mode and breaks this kid's arm just above the elbow. The kid came to school in a cast for the next couple of months, and there was a sub for about 2 weeks. The kid didn't get expelled, the teacher didn't get fired. This same kid tried to fight me a few years back, but chickened out because I had 40+ pounds on him. I think he got scared of everyone after he got his ass kicked by a retired veteran who didn't look like much. He was the biology teacher and had a plant setup, but it needed a bit more warmth, so he rigged a coffee timer to an infrared lamp and set it up wrong. The plants caught fire, burning down first the room they were in, the chemical lab stock room, and then the rest of that wing of the school. Male 50-year-old teacher. Too many infractions to name just one. Said about a girl student, "The only time your mouth should be open are when my pants are around my ankles." Got high with a basketball team. Would say "show us your tits" under his breath about hot chicks to any dudes that were around. Pushed me when I was taking a piss at the urinal and said, "Don't piss on your hands, son." History teacher who tossed out the entire history curriculum to talk about serial killers. When I was in 6th grade the teacher of the other class was pregnant and often had a sub. The sub got fired, but since he was there so often it felt like he was a normal teacher. He was pretty weird though, and did a bunch of weird things. Some of these include bringing beer to class and drinking it. Nobody believed the kids when they'd talk at it, answering students' questions very wrong, and yelling at anyone who corrected him, forgetting the kids had recess, even when the bell rang, and wouldn't let the kids outside. But the final straw that got him fired was when this kid asked to go to the bathroom and he screamed at him. He called this 11Y/O a cunt, a bitch, fucker, shithead, all the nasty bad words that would freak out a kid, all for asking to go to the bathroom. In front of the whole class. Obviously the kid started crying and begged to talk to the principal, and the sub just screamed at him more. My teacher from down the hall heard it and rushed over, yelled at the sub, took the kids into his room, and called the principal and the vice principal over. Our beloved teacher, Mr. Morn, had worked there for 29 years without incident and was one of the best teachers there. His classroom was always a laugh riot. He was the best roaster and encourages us to roast him properly. He never failed to get us motivated, and a lot of us owe our career inspiration from him. He was fired because he had jokingly smacked a student on the back of his head for making a stupid comment. It was like something out of a sitcom and all of us expected it and loved it. Yet one student, who was new at the school, was culture shocked by this. He thought it was strange but hilarious. He told his mom offhandedly, and his mom became the Karen. Never mind that the student was the teacher's godson. No physical contact was allowed, says the Karen. He was suspended with pay for 3 months pending investigation, then was let go because the Karen twisted the story and it blew up around the school. A year later, teacher won both the lawsuit against the school and libel case against the Karen, with her son being one of the key witnesses. We still keep in contact and roast him for getting rich over smacking kids around. Slightly similar story from my private high school. New math teacher that year had built a pretty good rapport with most kids in his classes. In one of them, one day about halfway through that year, some kid asks him what he did before he was a teacher. You know, something kids are always curious about. His answer: "I was a pimp for your mother." Admittedly inappropriate, but with any other kid in this particular, mostly male, class, this kind of locker roomy joke would have died right then and there. But this kid had had a fairly sheltered childhood and had never heard this word pimp. So, naturally, he called up his mother at lunch from one of the school's payphones. This was pre-cell, and asked her what this meant. Why, his mother wanted to know, did he have call her from school to ask her about this? Because Mr. J told me he was your before he was a teacher. He was gone never to return or be spoken of again, except in hushed tones telling this story before the afternoon. In this case I really don't blame his mother. OMG. This question is for me. None of these teachers were replaced. Once gone, we were all just given a passing grade. Freshman year high school, math teacher is a pedophile. Fired. Sophomore year, math teacher threw a dictionary at me for asking a question. Fired. Junior year, math teacher has a heart attack. FMLA for remainder of year. My poor senior year math teacher had no idea he'd be given so many dumb students who didn't learn first year math to last year math. He had to teach us from the beginning and work his way up. I commend and appreciate him so much. Good old public school education. Middle school theater. She played massive favorites in a way that even made the favorites uncomfortable, so all the students hated her. However, all the adults, my parents and my friends' parents, at least, thought we were exaggerating because, yeah, I know, theater. I assume someone in the grade after mine got a responsible adult to listen, or the school got tired of her doing Grease every single year. After she was fired, she started a weird cult where she would speak to a spirit named Maca for people, so I feel pretty validated on the whole calling her crazy thing. Woodwork/metalwork teacher at my school seemed like a cool guy. Bit weird but nice enough. One day we had a bomb scare and the school was sent to the Oval for the bomb squad to search through the school. It was quickly determined that the woodworking teacher called in the threat. Muppet used his own phone. After what seemed like a few hours of us sitting on the Oval, couldn't give you an exact time frame, a group of cops started swiftly moving all the kids out the back Oval into the nearby bushland, along a creek, and out into a nearby park. Turns out they were searching his house not long after they arrested him. They found plans to plant bombs under the Oval and call in a threat. No bombs were found. Everyone speculated that he was doing a trial run and taking note of where the kids were all sitting on the Oval. Pretty sure he was fired. Oh boy, where to start? Elementary school nurse was fired for taking the kids' medications. HS band teacher slept with a 15 years old. Swim coach left a hotel that he was at with his mistress drunk and killed someone with his car. My high school had like 400 students. One was such an unlikable teacher they were asked to retire. One was watching porn in class. One sent someone else's dick pics to a student's mom. One robbed a bank. Not when I was a student, but when I was teaching. Our health teacher was a very bubbly track and field star, fitness fanatic who coached the track and field team in the spring. She went to Arizona State on a track and field scholarship, holds numerous state records, etc. So the story goes, on a track trip, one of the other team's coaches went to college with her and recognized her. And he knew things. Somehow, as these things seem to do, what he knew was shared, and it flowed down to his kids, and then our kids found out. Pretty soon there was this unconfirmed rumor that Mrs. Bubbly track star apparently had been in a donkey show in college during a spring break trip to Mexico. Now, rumor alone won't get you fired, but this story going around basically made this poor woman have a nervous breakdown. Kids were making donkey sounds outside her classroom. Someone drew a huge donkey on the whiteboard with a massive dick. She was getting calls to her house, and then the parents found out. To the best of my knowledge, it was not true, just a story. But what got her fired was during this period of harassments, she snapped and kicked a 16-year-old kid in the groin. The ambulance came. The cops arrested her for assault. It was a big to-do. Honestly, most of the teachers felt that kid deserved a kick in the nuts. He was one of the bigger shitheads in the school, and he's really run with the donkey story stuff. But assaulting a student physically as a teacher is pretty indefensible. I'm still friends with her on Facebook, and she and her husband moved to Seattle and seem to be doing fine. She did have mandatory counseling, and she's never going to teach or coach again. But things worked out okay for her considering. It was our high school teacher. She seemed considerably sane when we first met her, but progressively grew insanely bad. Constantly getting angry, not teaching the students properly, making fun of children who were poor, getting indignant when we corrected her mistakes, telling parents lies about their children, and there were also rumors that she used to do drugs in school campus. In the end, she got fired because she didn't give my classmate who was having a severe allergic reaction medical attention cause she thought she was pretending. One of us ran to get the nurse without her permission. It wasn't life-threatening, but it was scary. The principal found out about it, and after a lot of complaints from both parents and students, she got fired. I went to school for culinary, and we had some really accomplished chefs teaching us. One chef taught the 9th/10th graders, two worked the public restaurant that was attached to the school with the 11/12 graders. The two chefs working with the junior/seniors, one was a no-nonsense male chef, and the other was a fun-loving, jovial female chef. A few of the, I don't know the term, middle-class girls who think they are street/ghetto, decided they didn't like the female chef. They spent 2 years absolutely dragging that woman, and by graduation you could see the joy for teaching left her. Our class made her quit. I was hired as a substitute teacher for an indefinite term at a private high school. Turns out the actual teacher just up and left the country with 1 day's notice to the admin. He didn't say how long he would be gone, nor was his absence approved. After being gone for 3 weeks, he unexpectedly showed up to work and planned to pick up the lesson plans where he left off, as if he was never gone. The school admin had me, a substitute, continue teaching his classes while he graded papers in the back. It was incredibly awkward for me, but especially the students, who didn't understand what was going on. The following day, he was fired when he arrived work and asked to leave the campus. The school gave me an interview, hired me full-time in his place. As this was the height of the recession and jobs were hard to come by, I was very grateful to have a full-time job. I will never understand why that guy would walk out on an okay job during that time and then just expect everyone to be okay with him doing that. Some people truly are on a different wavelength. A rumor said she gave a student a blowjob. She was new and attractive. It could be a jealous student or teacher. It was unfounded, but the Christian school was pressured to fire her and me. A parent thought teaching was a woman's job, and that a young man such as myself, even if I was just an aide, was only there to pray after children. The parent gave donations to the school, so naturally the school decided to look into the allegations. When the school saw the allegations that I was specifically targeting the parent's daughter was false. She claimed I interacted with her during the day I worked after school. She made the claim I was targeting all the other kids. Of course unfounded, but she was determined to see this through. She threatened to stop donating to the school and contact the school board. By this time the school decided that I was a sacrificial lamb and let me go, only telling me the allegations day if and the reason for letting me go. Naturally I was broadsided and stunned. Did I mention this school was the one I attended? So the staff knew me growing up. But money talks. The event destroyed any dreams of me being a teacher. I got front row seats, so to speak of a teacher losing his shit and attempted to choke my little brother out. Dude was like 5'5" and my baby brother is 6'2" and was an athlete. My brother never fought back, just looked down at him and asked if he had lost his mind. The teacher was foaming at the mouth, cussing him out with his hands wrapped around my brother's neck. A big crowd instantly formed as everyone poured out of surrounding classrooms, and the calculus teacher, who was also a big dude, grabbed the other teacher, picking him up and pulling him off my brother. Best part is this was in the early 2000s when cell phones with cameras had just become a thing. This was a rural school that tried to shut it down and rug sweep immediately, which obviously they weren't even able to attempt because kids called the cops as it was happening, and pictures were all over MySpace before my mom was even called about the incident. Also my mom is psychotic, used to take pride in weightlifting, so was built like a brick house with boobs, and my brother was her golden baby. She showed up. They asked her not to press charges, and then she found out the details and promptly went over the desk at the dude hiding behind the principal. When they wouldn't let her have her way, she spoke with the cops and then stomped off to the superintendent's office. It was a small town. She was well known and no one was ever happy when she showed up. Teacher was escorted out in cuffs and fired. His room had a sub for the rest of the year. All this happened because my brother corrected this guy on a math problem, and apparently his ego couldn't take that. We also found out he'd been fired from his last teaching job for a similar incident where he assaulted a student.